We're going to take a look at hair obstacles now. One of the main things to concern yourself with obstacles is the actual setup. And there's a few areas to look when you're concerned with obstacles. The first place is actually on the hair PPG. If we look at the very bottom on the general tab, we've got a collision type area. And this is where we actually set the mode that's going to be used for the collision. So the first mode available is average sphere. And that's pretty straightforward. It'll basically create a bounding sphere around all your selected obstacles. So it's an approximation of the obstacles, but this allows it to be much faster performance-wise, and it actually does give pretty good results. So one of the suggestions are when working with hair, especially when you're dealing with complicated hair objects, lots of guide hairs, complicated geometry, and you need to define complicated obstacles, it's a good idea to actually fill those obstacles with spheres to approximate the volume, and then select all those spheres as obstacles and use the average sphere mode. So in that way you approximate the actual obstacle object pretty accurately, but you still get a fast performance when you're calculating the collisions. So that's something we've done with a lot of client scenes in the past, and it works quite well. If that doesn't give you the results you want, you can go with the exact mode, and that actually is the slowest mode, but it's also the most precise. So of course it'll actually just take the obstacle geometry and the actual vertices and use those to calculate the collision. And the last mode we have is the XSI mode, and that mode is basically a special mode that allows you to use the obstacle properties itself when calculating the collision. So just to give you an idea of that, we'll just quickly apply obstacles on this scene. So I'm going to apply dynamics first to the hair, keep it in live mode, and that'll go environment, set obstacle, and select my sphere as the obstacle. So what happens then is we get an obstacle property page applied to the actual object, and we'll just open up the hair PPG so you can see. So we're in XSI mode. And what that means is we're going to end up looking at these options. The other two options, average sphere and exact, don't use the actual obstacle properties. So while we're in exact mode, we're in bounded box right now, so you can see as we go and translate this guy around, you see we're approximating a bounded box around the sphere, so we're not getting the most precise calculation, but it is pretty fast performance-wise. So of course we can use the other modes there. If we actually go to the hair PPG, reopen that, and what's a good idea when you're working with actual obstacles is to set the mode first before you actually select your obstacles, and this allows the hair to apply the obstacles in the proper mode, so you won't get any weird artifact issues from the start with the hair. So I'm just going to break that rule right now and switch my mode for the hair just to show you the differences. So let's just go back here. I'm going to pin this guy. So now we're in exact mode. So you can see there we're getting a much more accurate simulation. It's quite nice, but we're also getting a performance hit for computing that. And remember, the actual obstacle collision actually is applied from the guide hairs. So it's only the guide hairs that are being simulated. So if we turn this off and move this guy around, you can see it's only the interaction with the guide hairs that are actually being used. And then when we actually generate the render hairs are just computed based on the guide hair position. So you want to have the guide hairs in the path where your obstacle is, because if there's no guide hairs and it's simply an area between two guide hairs the obstacle is traveling between, you won't see any collisions occurring with those render hairs. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the last mode, like I mentioned, was average sphere, and we can just give you a quick example of how that works. So a little bit faster, because my obstacle is a sphere here, it actually looks pretty good. But you can tell with a more complicated geometry, you might not get the result quite as accurate as you want. One other thing to mention is the fact that when you actually set up your obstacles, you want to make sure none of the guide hairs are actually penetrating the obstacle before you set it as an obstacle, because in that case the guide hairs get initialized incorrectly, and you'll actually get some kind of artifact issues with the motion and the collision detection, because there's penetration involving the guide hairs and the obstacle already. So if you're looking at a character with long hair, the ideal thing, and you want to define the head as an obstacle, the ideal thing is to create a sphere inside the head and raise the hair off the head a little bit higher, apply gravity, and set your obstacle, and then run the simulation. Then the hair falls and it lands on the actual obstacle and computes properly. So that intersection thing is just something to watch out for when you're doing obstacles. So yeah, that's a quick look at hair obstacles.